Today is October 28, 2020. Welcome to another S&P 500 analysis. Today, the market had another ugly day. The S&P 500 is down a little bit over 3.5%, close to a 120-point drop. What we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at the S&P 500 and the market itself, the internals. And then we're going to take a look at some of the FAANG stock that are scheduled to report earnings this Thursday. The performance of these FAANG stock will probably provide the next catalyst for the market direction here in the near term. So the stock that we will be focusing on is Facebook, Apple, Google, and Twitter also, is part of the FAANG Plus. So we're going to be looking at these four stocks, and they are also Amazon, because Amazon is also scheduled to report earnings. They all scheduled to report earnings after the close on Thursday. So we're going to take a look at what the market is pricing in and the price range that the market is expecting these stocks to move after they report their earnings. So stay tuned. Okay, let's start off with this screen here. This screen here basically monitoring the intraday market internal. I have the New York Stock Exchange up-down volume and the NASDAQ up-down volume here. And right here is the up-down volume ratio that is labeled up here in the on the upper left-hand corner of the chart. And this is the advanced decline, the daily advanced decline, and how it moved up and down throughout the session. This is for the New York Stock Exchange, and this is for the NASDAQ, and this is the tick that monitor the number of trade occurred with an uptick versus the downtick. So it's a net difference between the number of transactions that took place with an uptick minus the number of downticks. So that will get you a net. And I explain a little bit more when we go through it. This is for the New York Stock Exchange, and this is for the NASDAQ. Then this is the E-mini S&P 500 future and the E-mini NASDAQ 100 future. Let's go to with the first start off with the up-down volume ratio here. The New York Stock Exchange, today's up-down volume ratio is about minus 6.86. So what that means is there are 6.86 times more the amount of volume traded down than up volume. And here is the net down volume or off volume if it's positive. So today there's over almost 3.5 billion shares traded with a down, in down volume versus the up volume. And for the NASDAQ, see that the up-down volume ratio is 2.41, and this is 1.4 billion share negative on a down volume. And here's the advanced decline. This is the number of issues of advancing in price minus the number of issues declining in price compared to the previous close. So when we see a negative number, that means there are more declining issue than advancing issue. And when we see a positive number, then we have more positive issue than declining issue. So when we see a minus 2,879, that means there are more declining issue, 2,879 more declining issue than the advancing issue. So here in the NASDAQ, we see minus 2,595. On the tick here, you can see that I have a line here. This is set at plus 800. This yellow one, or the golden dash line. And this red one is set at 1,000. So these are the positive number. That means when the transaction, when there are 800 or more traded with an uptick, then that signifies there are a lot of strong institution buying. And then when it gets to 1,000 or more, then there's really a strong buying. There's a lot of buy program going on. And vice versa, when it gets to minus 800, then that means there's a strong sell program. And when it gets to minus 1,000 or more, more negative than 1,000, that means there's a strong sell program. And you can see today, we saw a lot of lower than minus 1,000. You see this right here is almost, minus 1,268 area. When it opened, you see this big spike down here. This is like almost 1,700, minus 1,700 negative tick. So, and this right here is the cumulative tick. So it's basically a summing up all the positive and negative tick. So we're kind of getting a cumulative sum looking at the trend of this curve, and you can see that is basically it's just making lower low throughout the session. That means it just persist selling throughout the entire session today. And same thing for the NASDAQ. So everything is pretty negative today, and that kind of support the negative close. Here's the daily chart of the S&P 500, the cash index of the S&P, the SPX. And remember in the last video, we talked about the couple scenario, right? On the upside scenario is that we're looking for this thing to take out this pivot high. And if we could take out this pivot high, then the all-time high up here at 35.88 would be in play. Then the other scenario is coming down on the downside. Say if it come down to this 3428.92 and unable to find support there, then we're basically looking for this thing to come down and fill this gap at 3306. Then see will we get a bounce back up toward the 3428. And if it doesn't bounce, then we're essentially looking for this thing to work down toward the 3200. And this is going to be a critical level. We're saying that if it comes down to this 3200 and it doesn't get a bounce, let's say it come down and drop below this 3200, then essentially it could be a signal for a trend reversal, right? Because here's the high, and here's a lower high, and here's a low. So if it goes below this 3200, we essentially got a lower low, and that's where you get this lower high, lower low. Then that could be a change of reversal of trend from a higher high, higher low, right? So that's the things that we have to keep an eye on, is this 3200 level in the coming day. Now let's go back and take a look at one of the trade setup that I talked about on the last video. Is this potential, right? I'm emphasize the word potential. Right? Just because we have a setup doesn't mean that's going to be a trade. We have to wait for the trigger. Right? We were looking at this potential inverted head and shoulder, and the trade was if it able to break above this baseline and pull back a little bit, then that's where we're going to initiate a long to play for this pattern. Right? Then also the other thing is we're essentially looking for a stop here, and the reason why we are doing that is we're saying that, well, we ask the question, say, what makes this pattern to become invalidated? Well, if it get below this low, let's say pull back and get below this low, then now you no longer had a valid head and shoulder, inverted head and shoulder breakout, right? So that invalidates that pattern. And then the other thing is, right, we have this high, and then if it break above this high here, then we got a higher high, and here's the low. And if it pulls back and get below this low, then we essentially got a lower low. So now you no longer have a higher low, higher high, higher low, right? So that also break this, the rationale behind this particular pattern. So we essentially, and I put out a tweak, and also I post a chart and also a comment on my YouTube channel to say this pattern has been invalidated and is no longer in play. Okay, so and if we take a look at the current chart here, you can see that here's how it turned out, right? Because it never triggered, because we're basically looking at this baseline here, never got triggered. On Monday, it closed with a gap down, and you can see ever since, and today another gap down, and it came down to this low volume zone, 33.18, and it's continued to drop right now. So we be looking at the possibility of seeing would it come down to this 3200 level here, continue to come down here. So that's the other thing that we're going to keep an eye on for the coming day. Remember this gap, this is one of the gap that we're saying, if it is unable to find support up here and get a bounce, we're essentially looking for this gap to get filled. And that's what it did today. It came down and filled this gap. Now what it did is also is left this gap here and this gap here. So these are the two gaps that eventually will also need to get filled, and that would be on its way back up. So we'll see in the coming day, would we get a bounce when it come down to 32, or this is it, and we basically come back in to this 33.18 and start chopping around and get a bounce back up. So we're going to watch that next couple of days, and especially with the FAANG stock, such as Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Twitter, will their earning report create enough of a reversal or a bounce that will cause the price to go back up. So that's the catalyst we want to keep an eye on. Or would the earning be disappointed that it will actually take it down and dip below the 3,200, and that will cause the trend of the market to change from a higher high, higher low to a lower high, lower low. So that's why we want to keep an eye on these earnings on Thursday and see how they react after the earnings come out. Now let's take a look at these FAANG stock. The first one we're going to look at is Facebook. You see Facebook here. What I did is I also mark off this the range where the market have priced in on what they expect, what the market expect Facebook to move after earning. And right now, the market is basically pricing in a move on the downside down to 249.53, and on the upside, move up to 285.75. So right now, it's essentially pricing in a plus or minus $18.14 move compared to today, today's close. And that's essentially equivalent to about a plus or minus 7.4% move. So you can see that Facebook came up the highest 304.67, so somewhere around closer to 305, and it tried to come back and make a new high and fail. So you can see that made a lower high here, and then it pulled back and found some support here right near this gap here and at this low volume area here. Okay, then it started basically bouncing off this trend line. And today it came close to this trend line. Also, the blue area is what I call the high volume zone. And if you want to understand my rationale of these high volume and low volume zone and what they represent, I have a video that I put out earlier that I described that, spent a few minutes describing that, what does the high volume zone and what does the low volume zone represent. I will put a link in the description below, also the timestamp, so you don't have to watch the entire video. You could just skip to that section and you could go and watch that and find out what do I mean by high volume zone and low volume zone and what I expect from it. Okay, so looking at Facebook here, we basically right now is sitting at this high volume area, and we could see a little bit more chop tomorrow. And if we see a bounce, and maybe it could bounce somewhere around here at 270, and then on Thursday after the close, then when we get a report earning, if it's positive, the market react positively, then it could come up to this low volume area somewhere close to this 285. But if it's negative, we could be chopping around here tomorrow. Then after Thursday, then we could see this thing come down and maybe find some support down near this 249 area at this high volume area. Okay, this high volume zone. So that's basically what I'm looking at for Facebook. Now looking at Apple, we see this high here. Apple made a high here and then pulled back, right? And then it found support on this trend line as well and got a nice bounce off of this low volume zone. And it came down and tested this low volume zone or near it a couple times and got a nice bounce off of it. And essentially right now, we also got a trend line down here. So this is basically like a triangle, right, that it is trying to consolidate into. But today it broke this trend line here and it's coming down. So right now the market is pricing in a upside of $117, and then on the downside is 105. So we'll see what Apple will do after post-earning, after Thursday close. There is a high volume area here near this 110, so it could be coming down here and find some support here before it pushes back up. Then if it bounces back up and get up to this 117 on a post-earning move, it could see some rejection up here around this 117 and pushes it back down into the range here. Okay, so that's basically what Apple's look like right now. See, would it be able to find some support down here somewhere close to this 110 and see would it get a bounce back up. Otherwise, if it unable to hold support at 110, then we could look for Apple to move below 105 and back to test this low volume zone once again. Here we are looking at Amazon. Amazon also came down close to this supporting trend line here today. You see a nice bounce off of here when it tests this low volume area. And today it's basically chopped into this high volume zone. And the market is pricing in a move up to $3,353 on the upside and $29.72 on the downside. And that is about plus or minus $190 or plus or minus 5.7% move. And that's what the market is pricing in for the post-earning move. So we'll see, will Amazon hold this support here around this 3162 area and see would it be able to get a push up to that 3300. And if it could maintain above that 3300, there's a good chance that it could come up to this 3353 and possibly get into that 3400 for, before we see a little bit of a rejection and push back down. But if Amazon break this trend line, then we be watching the price down here near the 3,500 somewhere. 3,050. So somewhere around 3,042 area here in this high volume zone, and then down here at the 3,023. So those are some of the lower target down near the low end of the projection of the post-earning price target of $29.72. So it's key to watch Amazon. Would it be able to hold above this 3160 area and get a bounce off of that? And if it could get above, like I said earlier, 3,300, then there's a good chance that it could come back up to this 34. Again, essentially got a lower high here after it made a new all-time high. Here is Google daily chart here on Google. See, Google also came into this high volume zone here today near this 1510 area. And right now the market is pricing in a plus or minus $74 or plus or minus 5.3% move on post-earning. And the upper end is 1584 or close to $1,585 on the upside and $1,436 on the downside. So what we want to see is will Google be able to hold support on this trend line here? In other words, somewhere around 1475. It could hold about 1475, then we could see this thing come back up and work its way in, and maybe on the earning it will be a catalyst to push this thing up to fill this gap and get up close to that 1585 area. But if it is unable to hold this trend line, then we essentially looking for this high volume area to get tested to see would it be able to provide some support here somewhere around this 1460. If it unable to provide support, then we're essentially looking for the next high volume area, and that's pretty much at the composite point of control here at this 1436. And that's the price level the market is pricing in right now on the low side. All right, let's look at Twitter. Twitter is part of what we call the FAANG Plus. Okay, the original FAANG is Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. So now they added what we call FAANG Plus, and they added Twitter, Tesla, Nvidia, Alibaba, Baidu. So those are part of the FAANG Plus stock. As a matter of fact, there's an index called NY FAANG that actually track these stocks. So let's take a look at Twitter. Twitter is also scheduled to report earnings after the market closed on Thursday. Typically, Twitter report in the morning before the market open, but I guess due to the pandemic, they kind of reschedule it or alter the reporting schedule. So anyway, Twitter, the market is pricing in a plus or minus 13.35% move, or plus or minus $6.48. So that's a hefty move for Twitter. And if we take a look at here, this is the range. The upper range is $55. And the lower target is 42. So you see right now, today is kind of close near this low volume area here, around at this $48.50 area. So what we're going to watch is, would it be able to find support here, somewhere around this 46 area and get a bounce? Okay, and if it could not find support here, then we could see it come down to this low volume area which is around this 42 target, the lower target here. But if it could move up and take out this 50 area, this little bit of a high volume area, then it could take out this high, then we could see the possibility of moving toward this 55 level after the earning report. All right, so those are the FAANG stock that are scheduled to report earning, and depending on how the price movement ends up after earning report. So this Friday is going to be a heck of a day, depending on these earnings, from these company here. So that will definitely set the tone for the near-term direction of the market, because there's quite a number of market-moving stock in here, such as Apple and Amazon, Facebook as well, even though they are more technology-oriented, but they're also part of the SP500, right? So we kind of have to keep an eye on these stocks. So I hope you find this video informative and useful. Be sure to click that thumbs up to help me promote this video on YouTube, and subscribe if you are new to this channel. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.